And very quickly, when we started doing the math of what Tesla and Elon were saying, the more we read about them, the more we came out convinced as engineers कि यार तो सब सही है. It was such an easy pitch. Yeah, look at this product. It goes 20 kilometers per hour. It can't climb a flyover. Needs a battery replacement every 6-9 months. Versus we'll build something that will outcompete every petrol scooter and batteries will last 5-10 years.
Usually flying cars has been a science fiction stuff for the longest period. But now they're, as you said, they're a real startup, real prototype. With some effort, we can actually go get a demo in India. Do you think that industry will stay in this, prototype stage for a while?
Government subsidies came in. They really helped out the industry. It basically ensured that some of the startups like us, Ola, वगैरह, who were actually operational at that point, were not losing obscene amounts of money. We are all losing money. 500 crores, 1,000 crores, 1,500 crores. But we are not losing like 5,000-6,000 crores.
Hi, Tarun. Welcome.
Thanks, Mukesh.
Yeah, really looking forward to this conversation, Tarun. I think 10-12 years ago, there was electric vehicles was on no one's radar. I don't think people were thinking about it. People were not talking about it. India has always been a two-wheeler country. We have, I think, some 200 million, 20 crore plus installed base of two-wheelers. Every year, almost 1.7 to 2 crores vehicles, two-wheelers are sold. But, you guys in some ways helped kickstart the two-wheeler EV market in India, and now it's already like some 6-7% of the market and growing quite rapidly. And this all started while you were in college. I think just in last third or fourth year, if I understand correctly, you guys started thinking about it, and very soon after graduation you started this company.
Yeah, that's good. We started thinking about something else, but the idea was to build a company in the energy space, which became the idea of building battery packs, which pivoted to becoming the idea of building EV vehicles, electric vehicles. So we started almost immediately after college.
So it's 10 years ago. I don't know how much you still recall, but it's a industry that didn't exist at that time. And you guys were in your early 20s. And probably it was even technologically not proven whether this will be a commercially viable product or not. How did you find that conviction and start a company? And you guys were at it for next 4-5 years before you could ship your first product.
Yeah. Actually, you're right. That's the exact feeling we also had. Didn't really know much about electric vehicles at that point. We were mechanical engineering students. So it's the idea bhi nahi tha how everything will come together and how this will make sense. Because we were keen to build battery packs, we decided to sort of go back to college and read up about them after graduation. And as we started reading up more about them and EV industry globally in general, because we thought we'll be one of the suppliers to OEMs. It was like a mind-blowing moment to read this. There was this report that I read, Asian Development Bank report from 2010 or 12 or something. And I realized China at that point was already selling something like 20-25 million, 2.5 crore electric scooters, motorcycles, cycles, basically some two-wheeler of some sort.
2013 mein.
Yeah, 10, 11, 12, some that time. I was like, what? Because the worldview at that point was not that electrification is imminent and all vehicles will be electric. Yeah. But China had such a massive lead. So we got intrigued. And 2013, Tesla had just launched Model S in US. So two things happened basically for us. One, in one example, which is China, we just saw enormous scale by a country that's dedicated to one agenda in every industry. Very clearly electrification here. So volume ho raha tha. And in Tesla, we saw an amazing product. And that took us down this rabbit hole of basically reading up a lot of these public market filings of Tesla and public comments of Elon Musk. And very quickly, when we started doing the math of what Tesla and Elon were saying, so they were basically guiding battery prices will go in a particular way. They were guiding electronics, power electronics will go in a particular way. They were guiding a certain scale is required. If you, I don't know if you will recall, this is the time when they were talking about gigafactory, 50 gigawatt hour. Yeah. It just seemed like a crazy number. 50 gigawatt hour, like the world has an installed capacity of 50 gigawatt hour. Itna sara battery, ek plant mein what the world produces today. But the more we read about them, the more we came out convinced as engineers कि यार ये तो सब सही बोल रहे हैं. Everything that they're guiding about cells is right. And like you have to see the full picture, obviously. You have to see why they're guiding certain things about material. Then you have to see why Gigafactory. And I remember thinking then, if they are right and they sound right, like from first principles, yeah, the world will need not like 50 gigawatt hour, but possibly like 500-600 gigawatt hour. ऐसे 10 gigafactory लगेगी. Today the world is on its path to commissioning 2,000 gigawatt hour.
Wow.
Okay. So when we saw the product vision and the technology vision of Tesla, and just the sheer numbers that China was putting in, that is when I lit up for us. कि यार ये तो पक्का आ रहा है. 100% it makes sense. Everything that we're doing in India is probably incorrect. But fundamentally all of this is doable. This is on the right path.
But बिल्कुल थोड़ा self doubt नहीं होता, like you are, I'm guessing, product 22, 23.
Yeah.
And no precedent of, I know Mahindra ever tried building something, so maybe there was a bit of precedent, but it was also not a big industrial house, I guess it was Reva and eventually Mahindra acquired them, but didn't really go anywhere in the end. And Elon Musk was world famous by that time, and enormous success. Where did you find that conviction कि हम करते हैं और हो जाएगा, like being the first guy in India to actually build a commercially viable product?
The advantage of starting young and straight out of college is that you are only logical. You're not thinking practically at all. Right?
Very few 20-year-olds are only logical.
नहीं खाली logical और practicality तो आपने दगा ही नहीं. ठीक है, you have no idea. You've never been part of any company or any business effort before this, so you have no idea of what are the practical difficulties of building an automotive company. What is the scale required? Distribution क्या होता है? Marketing क्या होता है? Supply chain कुछ नहीं पता. For us, this was like a mathematical problem statement, right? Listen, and I remember the only thing that we wanted to basically be sure of is, will batteries cost $1,000 a kilowatt hour or $100 a kilowatt hour? And I remember, actually the moment of conversion for me personally was, so in this phase, we are meeting a lot of people from the industry to figure out, यार आप लोग ने क्या सोचा है? हम लोग सोचा है, but आप लोग क्या सोचो? Hopefully we don't have a big blind spot here. And I remember meeting this big VP at one of the two-wheeler companies. And his guidance was, यार नहीं यार EV sense नहीं बन रहा है because cost is very high. He said, help us understand आप cost ज़्यादा क्यों लग रहा है? Look at batteries, $1,000-$1,200 a kilowatt hour. Who will build a battery? 1.52 kilowatt hour का बैटरी लगाना है, 2,500-3,000 का आपने 2,500 का खाली बैटरी लगा दिया. That is freaking 2 lakh rupees, जैसे whatever, 1 lakh, 1.5 lakh रुपये खाली बैटरी है. कहाँ से स्कूटर बनेगा? नहीं बात तो सही है, but then how is Tesla doing this? I was like, कुछ math is not adding up. Then we tried ordering these cells that go inside the battery packs. And we realized, as two unemployed individuals sitting in a lab in IIT Madras, we can today order the same cells that Panasonic supplies to Tesla. We can order the same damn cells at $320 a kilowatt hour. Why is this VP saying कि यार इनका बैटरी $1,000 का बन रहा है? And that's when we so far as it was logic, it is just logic. We realized they have a very bad business model of how they're putting this together. We very quickly concluded that these guys are doing math wrong. Cells are already at 200. They will go down to 100. The total amount of raw material that will go around this battery pack is like another 20% upside. It cannot be 10x upside. ये लोग सब गलत spend कर रहे हैं. Put this math, and we concluded 85,000-90,000 rupees में electric scooter बन सकता है, which means 1.2 lakhs में बेच सकता है. So what are these guys thinking? Clearly wrong. तो फिर बना देंगे. If they are not thinking about it, they aren't serious about it, तो हम बना लेते हैं. कितना मुश्किल होगा? This is it. This is the extent of our thinking. इससे ज़्यादा नहीं सोचा था. खाली ये मैथ किया, उस मैथ के भरोसे पे कंपनी स्टार्ट कर दी.
No, but makes sense. You were able to get into the ground truths of your industry. And so thinking about market size and consumer adoption, a lot of fuzzy objective things, for subjective things, you're able to zero in from first principles. And I'm sure probably the prices must be coming down also. How much it is now for
batteries?
For that
sub $100.
Right? So I guess, and this pretty much reminds me of the story about Elon Musk also, how he started to decide the rocket company. Right? Again, same from first principles. How much does the kerosene oil cost and how much does carbon fiber cost and all. Then you put it together, and the cost should be 10% of what the Soviets were going to charge him for building a rocket. And now SpaceX has 85% market share of all rocket launches in the world, right? Yeah. So that gave you conviction that the math was working, but there really was no culture of investment into this deep tech, especially when you will take who knows how long at that time to build to ship your first product. So how do you navigate those first few years to support yourself and get enough money to buy these battery components, assemble things? And
actually, I don't think we really pitched this as R&D or deep tech.
Yeah.
But I think deep down, I was reasonably convinced that that's a very bad way to pitch this. Koi paisa nahi dega. And especially as to just out of college, if two folks go and say R&D karna hai, deep tech karna hai, pakka log bhaga denge. So you guys just want to do R&D, yahan pe nikal jao. So somehow, inevitably, we almost always pitch this as this is the kind of product we want to build. And a larger vision ki yaar, electrification is upon us. So you don't even need, this is one of those places where you don't even need to discuss target market kya hai, addressable market kya hai. Like, itne two-wheeler bikte hai, itne aur bikne hai, sab electric hone wala hai. We want to be a pioneer in it. Obviously, we'll have to find our own segment where we'll be good and where we'll not be good. But those are actually tier 2 details. Sab kuch electric ho raha hai. We want to be the first ones to build electric. Product banayenge, अच्छे से बेचेंगे. So we pitched this as a enormous market that is already there and just needs a complete replacement. So it's a replacement pitch. It's not a new market creation pitch. And dusra, product. So product is what I think we were very, very, very clear on. Ki no. Because, so 2013 mein, the one thing that was happening in India was there were a lot of EV attempts, but they were largely all not good products. I think Chetan was an exception, Chetan Mania Treva, because he had attempted to build a great product, but I think capital constraints forced him to build a small car. And I think India was already sort of premiumizing. Sab log SUV ke sapne dekhna start kar diya. So this was not a good fit. And the two-wheelers that existed were all these really low-power products from China. So it was such an easy pitch. Yeah, look at this product. It goes 20 kilometers per hour. It can't climb a flyover. Two people can't sit on it. It needs a battery replacement every 6-9 months. Versus we'll build something that will outcompete every petrol scooter, will be 30% more expensive, and batteries will last 5-10 years. It's a very easy product pitch. So we only product pitch kar rahe the. Iske piche R&D kya hone wali na? We actually kept it purposely a little, you don't need to worry about it. Because money will, humko jo kaam karna hum kar lenge, but we'll build that product.
Got it. So you had a pretty clear market story. Like if someone was going to, I think, and the fact that China already had that kind of adoption, and Tesla was starting to, pretty much become quite visible by that time. So it was just literally putting 2 and 2 together for people that already wahan pe ho chuka hai. India is in large, two-wheeler market.
It's pretty hard for most people to put together, however. So we got lucky enough fundraise a few times, but that was our story at least.
No, makes sense. And then, I mean, you were at it for next 5 years. That again, patience is not easy. Again, most are 22-year-old don't have that kind of patience. You judge your life's worth every 3 to 6 months. And so one is just a 2-part question, like, what enabled you and your team to stay focused for those 5 years? I'm assuming your revenue was probably zero before 5 years. And also a little bit about the IIT Madras environment around. I think last 10 years, they've created a pretty good ecosystem to support startup like yours. You were in fact one of the first few ones.
We were actually the first incubator company.
First incubator.
We might be the first or the second one.
Right. So how much, that environment also helped you in figuring out a lot of technical aspects of, designing the right product?
I think the point of incubation at IIT Madras was never that they will give us tech. I think for a private enterprise, that's a bad idea still in India to hope that academic collaboration se tech nikal jayega. Unless you are using something developed in college to launch here. Wo nahi tha hamare case mein. But the bigger point was, as you said, the environment. I very strongly feel now that we were very lucky that we started this out of Chennai, out of the research park of an engineering college, very isolated from all the startup noise that was in Bangalore, like at such an early stage. Because if you had gone to all these events, if you had heard every entrepreneur back then, if you had listened to all the good advice of IC, हम लोग सब गलत कर लेते. Like we would have been like, we need an MVP. We need to prove.
You need to fail fast.
Because now I think, what MVP will you make for a scooter? What are you trying to prove? Ki log scooter use karenge. Like underlying tech can be anything. Electric, petrol, CNG. There's actually secondary. You need a damn good scooter. So इसमें MVP क्या बनाऊँ मैं? इसका MVP तो इतना अच्छा production quality आएगा उस पर. Which will take years. But luckily ये विचार भी नहीं आया. So we were quite uninfluenced by everything that was happening. Fundraising also, I think our view was never, maybe should have been, but our view was not really valuations for it. We were pretty clear. We want to build this. We need a certain amount of capital for it. And we're not doing a step journey. We're not like, you give us X, we'll show Y metrics, basis which we'll both go out and raise 3X. So we'll show 10X, 10Y, whatever some metric improvement. Like, koi metric nahi hai. We want to build a great product. The only metric is you will see a better prototype. We got lucky, I will acknowledge that. Sachin Binny did the first round. And then Tiger Lee did the second round immediately after. ये नहीं होता तो शायद ये सब सपने रह जाते. But we got that money and we put it to good use, building a fairly honest product. And I think the reason we could stay focused for 4 or 5 years and not feel distracted is we got a great team together. And as a company, we discouraged pivots quite a lot. We're pretty clear as a company ki listen, and back then ऐसा नहीं कि external environment is changing every day. Hyper competitive scenario, रोज नया कोई लोग launch कुछ नहीं कर रहा. So we're pretty clear ki listen, we have a worldview of what kind of product will finally make it. We knew what kind of tech we want to develop for it. We're pretty clear why we want to develop that tech in-house and not outsource it to suppliers. तो फिर बस अब बनाओ. If any of those things materially change, we'll come back and discuss. Otherwise, you all make it. This allowed us to basically get fantastic people and let them be. Like, what I realized after a while is that great engineers hate it when founders have a constantly pivoting vision. अरे यार आज एक परफॉर्मेंस स्कूटर बना रहे हैं, अरे नहीं कल यार एक कम्यूटर मोटरसाइकिल बनाते हैं, अरे नहीं लिसन किसी ने कुछ लॉन्च किया, एक काम करते हैं फटाफट एक सस्ता डिलीवरी बाइक बना देता है, ठीक है, अरे कनेक्टिविटी इज कूल, अरे छोड़ यार कनेक्टिविटी क्या जरूरत है, एक बिना कनेक्टिविटी बिना का एक व्हीकल बना देता है. While you make all these mistakes once you grow up, at an early stage you don't want, like I realized gradually that engineers want stability. Tell us a great fantastic story and stay the heck out of the way. Let people build it, don't distract them. I think we lucked out that we created that environment. So those 4 or 5 years, Ather had near zero attrition. At team sizes of like 250, 300 people, almost nobody ever left us. And we didn't even pay them. Paisa bhi nahi tha. People were just like, listen, this is like college extension. College mein, these were people who were working on complex hardware projects. They came out, they found Ather, which would pay them a salary to basically continue building good stuff, which might actually see the light of the day.
No, I think there are a lot of really important, lessons in what you just described, right? It's I think one is building this very product-centric culture from day one, and that will attract, a lot of people don't necessarily want to work for money. They also want to work on very interesting problems and have enough autonomy to tinker with things, learn about new things, building their environment where the conversation was more about probably how do we get their wow for customers when they're going to see our prototype, as opposed to how do we get valuation X or Y, or in this pitch that investor asked this, so therefore can we pitch that to next investor next time, like very external, trigger driven. So that
we almost never brought any feedback back from investment pitches unless we believe this is valuable and we should change strategy for it. उस phase में strategy बहुत कम, 1-2 बार change हुआ, हल्का सा. Otherwise it was like we need to find an investor who believes in what we're doing. And then go with them.
On that also, I think, I believe good strategy in the end is very, very simple. For Cult, I summarize our strategy was in 2016 when we started that number one, fitness will grow in India. India does not have quality gyms. If build great experience, we are going to dominate the market. That's it. There is no rocket science to this strategy. But sometimes similarly, your strategy was, very clearly that world is already starting to transition from ICE to electric vehicles, large two-wheeler market in India. If you build a great product, we'll win. And pretty much you stay to that. Again, not a rocket science strategy, but I think a lot of people get confused. Strategy, they have this such complicated thought process, with nested level of thinking and so on, ifs and buts, and which is example of not a good strategy. And that is where you're forced to keep changing, keep pivoting, because you lack that, simplicity that comes from that clarity that comes from extremely simple but rooted in the real ground facts. And other, this, I think, we celebrate startup culture in India a lot, mostly for the right reasons, and we are finally seeing some deep tech companies also coming out. But this whole ability to work on a product for 3 to 5 years, I think that is still very, very rare. So I think for the people watching this podcast and who are interested in doing, world-changing things. I think that's other very important lessons to take away. If you want to, get your MVP in 6 months, then you can do something very simple, sell, trade some product or build something or copy something. But really want to create an impact, then that patience of 3 to 5 years, which is a lot of, India has no dearth of capable people.
Yeah.
But if you don't enable ourselves with that patience of 5-6 years, then very difficult to build those really, cutting edge.
Fully agree. In fact, I'm in the camp. I think we've lost the ability to think of really long-term projects. And I don't think we've solved that at Ather. 3 to 5 years is fun, but I think of our ancestors. Somebody starts building a freaking temple या फिर some cathedral in Europe, and plan क्या है? ये चालू कर रहा हूँ मैं. 200 years later, my dynasty will finally finish this, right? So just the mindset to be able to think in not like years or decades, but literally centuries.
Yeah.
And to be able to deliver on it, I think it's a different mindset.
Yeah.
I think it'll be very powerful. I think a lot of the Elon Musk companies, actually, I think the key differentiator is that they are just thinking in a different time frame.
Yeah.
SpaceX is thinking Mars space civilization. Yeah. It will not happen when any of them are alive. Right. They will all would have likely died.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's a conversation that more of us in the startup world should have. I think we should celebrate attempts to think in that time frame. नहीं सोचते.
No, it's also not easy. In this podcast, actually, multiple times I've talked about this whole idea of compounding or long term. And when you start thinking of compounding in decades and next, not years, then numbers just magically what you can imagine 20-30 years down the line.
Yeah.
But it also requires a little different type of ecosystem to enable. See, a lot of it also the entrepreneurial ecosystem is powered by venture VCs, and most of them have a limited fund life of 8 to 10 years. And by the time they invest in a company, they're 5 years. So the primary thing is how do we get exit in a 5 to 6 year time frame from the date of investment. So I think access to also different type of capital. Elon Musk pretty much started everything with his own capital initially. But I think that's also a little bit happening. More 10 to 15 year horizon. I actually met Vinod Khosla recently. He said in at least one of their fusion startups, the product market fit horizon was set as 12 years. So now that I think Silicon Valley is able to do that. At least some investors and some portion of their fund, they're able to think. So that enablement is required. But having said, first of all, you need to, I can invest my time, you can invest your time. So the entrepreneur, if I am not willing to give myself 5 or 10 years, then why is somebody else?
There's no chance in Yeah. You at least need to be comfortable with the idea that 10 years mein, this will become something. If your vision is not 10-15 years, then to start hi nahi hai.
I think it's a very important point. I really hope some of the at least prospective entrepreneurs watching this, some people resonate with that thought process and enable, especially people in their early 20s, mid 20s. I mean, 10 years nothing. You'll still go to by 35, which is very young, by every possible yardstick. So it's not like talking about your lifetime. So to get to 2018, I mean, so by the time you launch, you were first in many ways in the country, like in the I think you were sharing with me earlier. Why do you talk about all the things you had to solve for and be the first in the country to be able to finally ship a viable product, which was I think received with a lot of love and people were genuinely wowed with the quality it was able to deliver. But what was required to get there?
So we had to do a lot of things first in the industry. So first, we were pretty convinced that building anything less than a Honda Activa and performance would be a dead on arrival project. Because Honda Activa is what the market ka base requirement now is. Usse niche jaonge, then who will buy this? And Honda Activa is 75,000 rupees. You can't build, your material cost of an EV scooter is going to be more than 75,000. So you have to have a higher level of performance, which means the first high-speed electric two-wheeler in India. Before us, the high speed was 40-50 kilometers per hour. We launched at 80-90 kilometers per hour, which meant 5 times more power. So first high speed, we were convinced that, not convinced. Basically, we lacked the manufacturing expertise of the large players. So very funnily, we could not build a steel frame. Steel frame is actually an ancient technology, but it requires a very large capex to do right. The capex to tha nahi, aur log bhi nahi the. So we were forced to actually build an aluminium frame, which was casted and bolted, which today is considered one of the best frames in the country, as damn expensive. But you're forced to do it and actually start this genre of aluminium frames in two-wheelers or scooters. उसके अंदर 2-3 scooters और आगे जिनके aluminium frames है. So you're forced to do that first because manufacturing नहीं थी. We were forced to do fast chargers. There were no fast chargers in India. And we were convinced that एक ecosystem build करना पड़ेगा. So we opened Ather Grid, which is the first network of two-wheeler fast chargers in India. Today it's about 2,500 fast chargers. It's the largest. The other big thing we were forced to do, this is actually a forced thing on us. ये सब मैथ कर लिया, स्कूटर समझ लिया, एल्यूमिनियम फ्रेम बन गया, चार्जिंग हो गया, बैटरी हो गया, lithium-ion batteries. I think we were the first. Then we did all this math and we're like, listen, even assuming we can bring down the cost over the next few years, this scooter will never cost less than 1.1 lakh rupees. Okay, when an Activa is 75,000. How will you convince customers to pay a 50% premium? And that's the learning that came from Tesla. When you're already so damn expensive, don't skimp on the masala on the top. Add that to make sure the customers finally let you get at least some customers to pay you a premium. So the premium that we decided was connectivity, for which we were forced to figure out how to put a display on a scooter. So what it finally became was the first production two-wheeler in the world to have a touchscreen dashboard and have Google Maps and have bunch of these things, bunch of features, connectivity, sab kuch. So these are all the things we were forced to do first. Some because that was the vision. Some like connectivity because at that point we were like, the only way we can convince early adopters to buy this by paying a 50-60% premium is by offering something truly differentiated. Same at level as Activa and performance or marginally better. It's not differentiated. But connectivity and software is differentiated. So वो बनाना पड़ेगा.
And this connectivity was through the telecom network that you tied up or through your phone?
No, so we put a 3G SIM card back then, 2G I think, 2G, 3G, 3G there, or 4G here. So we put a SIM card in the vehicle and that was the product view. Ki yaar, see, if you're going to depend on somebody using their hotspot to power the scooter every time, वो पहले 3-4 बार करेगा to show their friends and then they would stop pairing because हमेशा जाके hotspot connect करो, scooter को pair करो is like a painful experience. So put a damn SIM card inside and hope and pray that costs come down so that you can support the cost of the connectivity, which is what luckily happened. Jio really worked out. So yeah, those are all the things we were forced to do first.
Incredible, just 5-year journey. And I mean, I know you said you were lucky with some fundraising, but also it was not obscene amount of money, I think.
No, like knowing what I know today, it was not obscene amounts of money.
Right. And, I think, and you had, some initial hiccups. I think, it was a kind of industry defining new product, but fast forward from 2018 to now, it's only 6 years. And in some ways, you guys helped kickstart, the industry. Then other players came in, a few years down the line. Some of the established two-wheeler guys have also launched their electric version. And today now, I think we were just saying earlier, almost 1 million electric, two-wheelers are sold in the country.
Yeah.
I'm guessing the number must be growing at least 40-50% every year?
No, it'll grow much more. This year, I think analysts' projections that we have seen, I think hover between like 50 to 100% growth. See, okay, put it this way. A lot of people think that electrification of two-wheelers will be in the range of 40-50% by the end of this decade, which means about 10, 12 million vehicles potentially by the end of this decade. It is 6 साल बचे हैं. So 6-7 साल में you have to take a 1 million का number to like 10 million. Even if you discount it and say, नहीं, खाली 6-7 million होगा. 1 million going up to 6 million in 6 years is a pretty heavy amount of growth substantially.
Yeah, and most of those growth will come to top, 4 or 5 players, I'm guessing at some point.
Two-wheeler industry has been historically very consolidated. मतलब थोड़ा consolidated. It's never been like 30 players. Because consumers can't remember the 30th player in a year. Consumers will stop remembering after 7-8 brands.
Yeah.
So that's been the extent of this industry, 6-7 players typically.
Can you also talk about the role that the government subsidies has played in kind of catalyzing this industry? Because initially, costs were quite high.
Yeah.
And I think that's one, I think from at least what I understand, is a good example of a subsidy at the right time to the right players to catalyze the market to help people get to critical mass. And then industry can be self-sufficient from there on.
So in retrospect, I'll tell you what subsidies did. I don't think any of us understood that's what subsidies are doing. I don't think even the government understood that's what subsidies are doing at that point. But basically, subsidies really became large starting late 2021, I think. Now, what was happening at that point was the industry was early stages, 1,000, 2,000 units a month per player, 15, 20,000 units ka total industry size per month. Now, auto industry in India and globally is hyper optimized. Material prices don't go up practically any year, while your sales price keeps going up. So that's because engineers now over 100 years have ultra optimized every part. यहाँ पे ये कट का कितना एंगल को घसना है, मटेरियल कितना श्रिंक करना है, मटेरियल स्वैचिंग, सब बहुत सोच चुके हैं. When you bring in EV technology, the problem on day one is it is ultra not optimized. So typical EV scooter manufacturing cost in 2021, I would say was about 4 or 5 times more for different players from what I saw compared to the petrol counterparts. Which means selling at even 1.5, 1.6 lakh rupees was a massive money-losing proposition. Now, if in this scenario, you have no subsidies, you want to sell, the only way you will sell is 2 ways. Either you will basically go and increase your prices to something like 2.5 lakh rupees, at which point you will sell nothing. And you will never build the critical mass to grow. Ya fir dusra, you will say, ki I'll lose VC money and I'll sell this. But losing money on hardware is damn difficult. 1 lakh rupiya per vehicle lose karonge, you will be out of business in no time, right? And that's where government subsidies came in. They really helped out the industry. Government started offering 50,000-60,000 rupees ka subsidy per vehicle. Even though prices were high, it basically ensured that some of the startups like us, Ola, वगैरह, who were actually operational at that point, were not losing obscene amounts of money. We are all losing money. 500 crores, 1,000 crores, 1,500 crores. But we are not losing like 5,000-6,000 crores. This basically gave us just the right amount of support at the right time to sort of break through and get to a place where you have meaningful volume build ho jaye, and you gave your engineering enough years to bring down the cost. Subsidies started collapsing last year. Now they're down to just 10,000 rupees. But it's coincided with the amount of time needed to bring down the cost. Now we've more or less made it. We still need some subsidy, but you don't need 60,000 rupees per vehicle. In fact, let me put it this way. If today you have to start an EV scooter company in India, EV two-wheeler company in India, what you'll quickly realize is the entry barrier, because everybody's built their base, has gone up to something like $100-200 million. If you don't bring that much cash on day one, you can't break in. In a way, this challenge was there even before. It's just that subsidies kind of gave you the air cover to not bring that money on day one.
Do you recall or at its peak, like what was total annual subsidy to the EV market?
No, market actually बहुत छोटा था. इसके लिए I think government also got a good deal. Without burning through the entire annual budget, they could kickstart the industry. I would say probably 2,000-3,000 crores per year.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, not crazy.
Got it. And now in some ways the industry has achieved escape velocity. If it is growing at, that...
Close to it. I would say maybe another 2 years. But it's close enough. The government can still spend the same money, but at like 10x more volume now.
Yeah.
So government lucked out and never had to get to a place where they needed to, like semiconductors. Government will have to think of spending like 1 lakh crores, so some crazy amount of money to subsidize the creation of this industry. EVs, I think the subsidy came at the right time.
That's great. I think, India has historically also been decent in the automobile industry, especially last 20-30 years.
Yeah.
A lot of, talent is there, part supplier are there. And if they can have a strong homegrown EV industry, which looks like, I think we've got enough number of players with the near critical mass and good kind of momentum behind them. And if the numbers you are saying, two-wheelers, we get to hopefully somewhere between 6 to 10 million EV a year, which is, $10 billion industry. I think it'll be next decade, going back to long term. If you fast forward that to, 10, 20 years from now, I'll come back to your long-term roadmap later. But let's spend time on that. It's what does it take? How just help, the listeners of this podcast visualize what goes into building a electric two-wheeler, how difficult it is, what are the critical part, and how does a factory look like? We'll get some visuals also so people can see, but I want to describe, what goes into setting it up.
So, one of the central pieces typically in any good EV is the battery pack. A lot of us would build the entire vehicle around the battery pack. So for us, for example,
how big is the battery pack, just to visualize size?
about this much.
Okay.
Yeah, the size of a small
briefcase.
formal briefcase. वो तो पहला था उससे थोड़ा मोटा, but yeah, roughly this much. On our scooter, car का बड़ा होता है.
And this is about 4 or 5 kilowatt hour.
3 to 5 kilowatt.
3 to 5. Okay, got it.
सबके इतनी sizes में. This will weigh like something like 20 kilograms, maybe 20-25 kilograms. This is the central piece. Some of us would make this the central part of the vehicle, which means पूरा chassis ही इसके ऊपर build होता है. So you put this first and then you start building everything else around it. It's a very efficient way of doing it. This battery pack building itself is pretty complicated because it's not like एक battery है जिसमें positive negative terminal है. It's the assembly of this battery pack will have a few hundred cells. These cells look like these cylindrical or AA, AAA cells types, but उससे थोड़ा बड़ा. You'll have a few hundred of these cells that have to be very, very, very.
These cells are made in India or imported?
The cells right now are not made in India, but I think over the next 2-3 years they will be. The cells are right now imported. I think the import value of these cells will be like 15, 20, 25% of a typical two-wheeler cost, electric two-wheeler cost.
Yeah.
But you will take a few hundred of these cells. You got to precision assemble them. You've got to pour a lot of cooling compounds around them, just the right amount, in the right way, in the right process. Then you've got a very complicated welding process around them. Because let's say you've got 200 cells. 200 cells need a welding on the top, need a welding at the bottom. And you can't have any potential failure because they will need like multiple welds on both sides. So, you're talking about like several hundred welds per pack. Even if one of those welds goes off, pura battery pack is probably scrapped at the end of it. So it's a very, 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 it's a reasonably complex manufacturing assembly process. You do that and then you put a whole amount of electronics on top of it, because that's the piece of electronics that will monitor all these cells all the time, constantly checking like 20-30 parameters. Like in our case, I think this battery management system will check, I think, 30 or 40 parameters 10 times a second, 10 hertz ki frequency pe, constantly. So it's a fairly complex piece of electronics there.
That again, design in-house.
Yeah, design in-house. So then you build this full pack and you got to take a lot of heat out. So that's another complex piece of engineering. So you will put a lot of compounds, you will do a lot of mechanical engineering, a lot of assembly techniques, because this battery pack will generate, let's say, could easily generate 1,000-1,500 watts of 1,000 watts of heat constantly. So you got to take that all out and keep the batteries really cool.
And it's like, ultimately, it's like, how is that heat thrown out?
Different ways. Bigger vehicles like cars will use fans and will use radiators to just sort of cool this entire thing down. You could literally refrigerate the entire thing. In a two-wheeler, you can't afford that. So you need, best case scenario, you'll have like a fan. But otherwise, generally what you will do is you will basically design the casing in a way and route air around it in a way that it will cool down very fast. So for example, we use an all aluminum case because aluminum is a great conductor of heat. So you will suck out the heat very quickly out of the cells, dump it into the case, and the case ke around you will throw a lot of air and cool it down while it is operating. Because if chal nahi raha, वैसे भी गर्म नहीं होगा. So you will start with the battery pack. Then there's a lot of electronics that comes. So contrary to what people think, because there's a common conception that यार EV में क्या है, एक मोटर है, दो टर्मिनल है, कनेक्ट करो, पहिए लगाओ, चलाओ. Generally, EVs require much higher levels of R&D than the petrol counterparts. The number of components is generally higher, not lower. Just the number of moving components is lower, but the number of components is higher because the amount of electronics just skyrockets. So you will have, for example, a motor. Typically, all of us will put the motor somewhere in the frame, then put a transmission to run the rear wheel. To run that motor, you need something called as motor controller. And that piece is a reasonably complex piece of engineering because how you and a lot of the company ka differences comes there. How you throttle, वो throttle करने से कितना acceleration मिलेगा, regenerative braking कैसे work करेगा, वो heat कैसे manage करेगा, all of it the controller decides. So it's a fairly complex piece. Then you've got in most EVs these days you will have some level of compute somewhere, typically on the handlebar. So you will have a screen there which requires its own processor. Then you will have a back-end compute which will basically speak to all the electronics on the vehicle. 5-6 board honge idhar sab jagah. There's a BMS, battery management system, there's a controller, there's a lights operate karne ke liye वगैरह सब लेगा piece of electronics. The electronics itself is like a 300-400 component behemoth somewhere on your vehicle. And the wiring harness alone, I remember the first vehicle that we put out, the wiring harness per vehicle used to cost us 25,000 rupees. It's optimized now, it's come down a few thousand rupees, but it is still, I would say, like several times more expensive than the wiring harness that goes on a typical petrol scooter.
Yeah.
Because just the sheer amount of electronics everywhere. The rest of it is probably more like any other two-wheeler. There are wheels, there's suspension, there's a frame. So you keep mounting these components one on top of each other and the vehicle comes through.
And for this, you build the entire kind of assembly line from scratch, kind of custom built to be able to do. And what is your production capacity today? How many you are able to produce in a day?
So we're just starting the production of a second product next month onwards. So we have the capacity to do, I think, about 3-4 lakh units per annum now. So hopefully with the second product, we'll get close to utilization.
So that basically translates roughly as 1,000 a day.
A little bit more than that. You'll have to do almost 1,500 a day.
Okay, because not got it.
NPD, बहुत सारी छुट्टियां होती है सब होता है. You have to account for all of it.
Right. So literally every, I don't know, like you can do the math, but every couple of minutes, within 1 to 2 minutes, one scooter coming out, like that's
Yeah. So in fact, faster than that. Yeah, faster than that, definitely.
And this must be like massive facility. Like what goes into designing this whole setup?
So usme that you can. So we as a general principle, we are more capital efficient. So there are different approaches. You can approach automotive manufacturing from a massive scale perspective, that you want like a lot of scale on day one, because eventually that will give you lower cost per vehicle. Our view is that the industry is still forming. You don't want to commit a lot of capex very early, because architectures can change, technology can change. Your product itself will change quite a lot over the coming years. So we've gone for a fairly tight assembly. This is 4 lakh units or something. I think the total area would be like 20-30 acres, so reasonably tight, but fairly well packed. So we don't have a lot of free space to do random stuff. But it keeps a capex low, and it allows us more flexibility. So as we launch a second product, third product, fourth product, we can now set up more customized lines, more customized facilities for what these products will be. As opposed to committing ourselves कि 2018 में देखो 2020 में decision ले लिया था. We said lines will be in a particular way, flow will be in a particular way. Now you can't change, because that'll really straitjacket you.
And earlier you were saying you have, I think, over 1,000 research engineers.
People in product development. Research is a dangerous word, because immediately you start thinking of PhDs in white coats. So I would say people in product development.
Understood.
Yeah, engineers would be obviously the majority of it.
Got it.
Like 50, 60, 70% would be engineers.
And is this an area where technology is still moving at a fast pace? Like new things are coming out, or it's fairly stable now?
No, crazy pace hai yahan pe. I would say that 3 big technology frontiers here. First is batteries, obviously, because battery tech is changing constantly. In the 6 years of operations, our battery tech has changed 1, 2, 3, 4 times in 6 years. And most of these changes have led to, I think, a capex updation.
Because you have to redesign the whole assembly.
You have to change some processes, you have to change the layout. So underlying tech has changed, cell has changed, chemistry has changed, सब कुछ change होता है. The second frontier, I would say, is the software. So actually I spoke about software, but actually the bigger part of designing an EV is the algorithms that drive it. That's actually where a lot of the secret sauce of every company goes. And there's a lot of work happening there. So between that and your more let's say visible software, like all the stuff that you see on the dashboard of the mobile app, that stuff is upgrading very fast, because connectivity is changing very fast. 4G, 5G, now they're talking about 6G. Every time you move a generation up, suddenly your frontier of what you can do with that goes up. The chips that come, Qualcomm, MediaTek, their capability skyrockets every 12 months, 18 months. And the third thing I would say is power electronics. That's a little slower, but power electronics is all the electronics basically I'm talking about. That stuff keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I remember जब हमने start किया था 2014 में, we had moved to Bangalore, and we used to talk about these gallium nitride technology to build chargers. Damn shit was very expensive, and मेरे को समझ नहीं आता यार, चार्जर इतना बनता है, उसको मैं थोड़ा सा छोटा करने के लिए while I spend 10x more, this is stupid. But today, all your fast chargers that come mobile phones, are all GaN chargers. And that is something very attractive. It's no longer 10x more expensive. And chargers are getting much smaller.
Yeah.
So it's unlocking new frontiers of how much heat you can manage.
Sure.
Basically, stuff like GaN वगैरह allow you to manage much higher levels of heat. So तीन चीजें हैं. I would say power electronics, maybe the slowest changing. But even the slowest changing stuff is 3 साल में कुछ नया upgrade आ जाएगा. आपका battery probably battery and connectivity at the same rate. I would say practically every 18 months, you need to overhaul your entire architecture and your entire product plan.
So Tarun, I think, the whole two-wheeler EV industry is reasonably mature. I mean, it's shipping, 1 million vehicles for the industry as a whole every year. And we no longer hear about at least those fires and accidents and this, that. I think, there was a bit of teething period that the industry went through. But seems like very stable. But, technology also has a way of continuing to improve, upgrade. Now that we've kind of reached critical mass, I'm assuming the R&D in this space also must be accelerating. So how does next 5 to 7 years look like? Are there any new breakthrough expected? Or at this point, it's about just perfecting the technology as is, incremental improvement, engineering the scale is where most effort to. I mean, we should really get to a point where electric vehicles are at least half of the whole grid, if not more. At some point, love to see the back of IC engines across all the vehicle types. But what's to expect on the technology horizon on EV front?
So, I think in some of the more fundamental pieces of EV tech, like motors, batteries, I think we are 70-80% of our way there. There is more, I would say, more incremental innovation expected every year. Think 6-7% improvements every year. But that, as you say, compounding 10 years is a big difference. I think the bigger changes on the product side, less on the tech side for the next few years, let's say 5-10 years. I think what's going to happen is electric and connected vehicles are going to open up a lot of new use cases, even on existing form factors. Like just recently, we basically what we are seeing is, and I should say really the industry is seeing is, because you've got a lot of compute on your vehicle, because your entire vehicle is anyways electric, anyways Sara data signaling is, everything is already set, you have an ability to improve riding experience quite substantially. A lot of these small changes add up. For example, using regenerative braking, you can let go of manual brakes. Using motor controller, you can hold your vehicle at any incline, anytime. Your blind spot awareness starts going up because you can start adding sensors for all of it. Your vehicle balance can get better. Self-balancing as a technology starts becoming far more relevant the minute you become electric. See, petrol mein self-balancing lagana is like crazy amounts of engineering. Electric mein self-balancing lagana is comparatively easier. So a lot of your product advantages start adding up that make two-wheeler substantially better experience. Connectivity plays a big thing. So, for example, like we did this recently, just 2 months ago, we did a very large event, 1 month ago actually, and we launched a smart helmet. Basically, it's got speakers, it's got mic. You can use that to talk to the vehicle. You can start navigation by just talking to the vehicle. You can talk to the rear pillion rider. You can just talk.
Hopefully not a phone call while riding.
Some stuff there, yeah. But a lot of these experiences can just get so much better because you've got connectivity and the entire powertrain is electric. So I think overall, cars mein trend third time pehle chalu ho gaya tha because Android Auto came in, and car is a more closed environment, right? So some of this stuff was already there. Two-wheelers mein, I think largely we've not had any amount of product premiumization or new technology come in a big way. I think electric and connected will drive that in a pretty massive way over the next 10 years. Uske beyond, if you look, then I think you're talking about possibly new form factors, not just two wheels, but more things that you can do with an electric powertrain. You should have flying vehicles. You should have flying cars. Flying cars are not like fancy stuff. Like it's already real. There are startups that do it. And I think it starts becoming more and more relevant, maybe not in the near term, but let's say midterm, let's say 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
I think 10 to 20 years, stuff like flying vehicles become very, very exciting, very interesting. However, I am somebody who very strongly believes it's all going to be personal mobility. I'm not somebody who say, yeah, the future is all buses and trucks, buses and trains and all that stuff. I think upgrading economy as people become richer, per capita GDP goes up. Aspiration hai, everybody will have their own personal mobility.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at either West or China is any indication, in US, if I understand, there are 800 cars per 1,000 people, something like that.
Yeah.
Well, we have, I think, 30 per 1,000 people. So the factor of 30, that's the thing. And what a car is effectively a personal mobility.
Yep.
You know, it's available whenever you need it.
Car should be, even 2 wheelers. We are at 1/3 the penetration levels of Indonesia. Like 2 wheelers भी enough नहीं है. गाड़ी तो बाद में
The whole country is island, so कहाँ जाते हैं 2 wheelers?
2 wheelers, अरे पूरा South East Asia, Vietnam ले लो, Indonesia ले लो, Thailand ले लो. We are like 20, 30, 40% of any of these countries in penetration. Not so. 2 wheelers में अभी तो growth बहुत बाकी है. फिर cars आएगी, cars में बहुत growth बाकी है. And I'm the camp. Personal mobility will drive a lot of it.
Yeah, I think let's just talk about a little bit of, the flying cars for a second, right? See, look, just 5-6 years ago, AI was also this, pipe dream, right? And now no one blinks an eye, when thinking about AI is like here and now and quite real and going to dramatically better in next, few years. Similarly, flying cars has been a science fiction stuff for the longest period. But now they're, as you said, they're a real startup, real prototype, with some effort, we can actually go get a demo in India or outside. Do you think that industry will stay in this, prototype stage for a while? Or there is a chance that in this decade itself, someone starts selling and, we can just buy, assuming regulator also keep up?
Hard for me to predict if in the next 6 years, this decade, we will see commercialization we may see commercialization, but scale commercialization is probably the next decade. But I'm certain it will happen. And I think we'll see a fair bit of all this tech coming up in India in the coming years. I think what's happening with what all of us have done in the EV space is one of those few industries which are on a cutting edge technology perspective, and India is actually spending meaningful amounts on R&D. And I think the success of what happens with electric two-wheelers today in India will power more investments in more crazier dreams tomorrow. I think the flying car, fundamentally, even if I were to think from our perspective, if let's say we want to build flying cars, the thing is, it just boils down, in my opinion, how much engineering muscle are you willing to invest in? How much R&D are you willing to invest in? And for which you need some validation, some proof कि यार इंडिया में वो इन्वेस्टमेंट करके कुछ रिटर्न आया है, कि यार नहीं ये सब तो टेक्नोलॉजी ऑस्ट्रेलिया में बनेगी, फ्रांस में बनेगी, जापान में बनेगी, इंडिया में नहीं बनेगी. I think if we see some of these efforts starting to pay off in private or public markets, you will see enough people starting to say कि हाँ यार डालो 100 million, 200 million in all these efforts in the future. And I think we'll see that. Specific timeline I don't have a view, but I'm very confident it will happen in the next decade.
Yeah, I think now mostly probably engineering challenges are left, but the science challenges are not there. I mean, there are
those startups can't solve. But that I agree. I think आपको fundamental science पे काम करना है, then that's really a startup's territory,
right? Because
the unpredictability is so high. But if fundamental physics is figured out, then engineering is where you can take a reasonably balanced bet. Is it a 2-year problem? Is it a 5-year problem? And then you can invest.
Say last 10 years, and we talked about the size of your product R&D team. So you must have also trained, hundreds or more, thousands of engineers probably. Some of them will start to, start their own deep tech startups in the...
Yeah, we've seen a lot. I haven't counted, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are a few dozen startups of alumni.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, some of them will also probably at some point attempt to build flying cars.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, but no, I think this is how, this is great from ecosystem creation point of view. I've seen the Skyroad also, over the period of time, number of people left, and they're doing really cutting the stuff in robotics. In fact, one of them is building a vertical takeoff landing type of vehicle.
Okay.
So I think that's another service in some ways you are doing, because you are not only in some ways creating an industry, but also creating an ecosystem. There must be a lot of part supplier at this point, a lot of technology would have probably brought from outside, developed indigenously and so on. So I think that ecosystem creation will also like, in the internet space, Flipkart, Myntra ecosystem, so many, like many hundreds of entrepreneurs come out of that.
Correct.
So I think we'll see that, which is also very, very promising for the country.
Yep.
Yeah. So just, you briefly alluded to, what is, you just zoom out and, see, I see there are only few companies which I would consider truly pioneer in a deep tech space. Skyroad is there, you guys there, Ola Electric is there, few others that I'm probably not recalling right now. What's your point of view for next 10 to 15 years? Is it just a organic journey that we'll see more of this, or some more ecosystem enablement needs to happen? Because barring a few years, we are still very technology dependent on West for a lot of things. Do you see it's changing? Anything can be done by government, private players to accelerate the change?
I think we need more companies that want to build a product development culture. I think one of the most valuable pieces of IP we are creating is how we do product development at Ather. Not in a specific piece of IP, but how work flows, how the entire product development process is defined. Because what we realized, this is 2016, we had, I think, our first hire for process excellence we had back then. Because we were very insistent, even back then, 2016 May, we want to make this like such a brainless process that like work just happens. Because one of the early observations we had was, same people, when they go and they work at an Apple or a Waymo or a Tesla, they suddenly like are able to like build so much and solve such crazy hard problems. But in the Indian environment, they're not able to solve it. So I think just this, how to do product development from scratch, especially physical product development. I think a lot of the work that you guys have done in building the entire e-commerce industry has created an amazing culture of doing product development in that space.
Yeah.
Between that and SaaS, India has really, I think, gone a long way in doing software product development. But hardware, physical product development requires a different process. And I think we need more companies that will commit to solving it in a big way. The examples that I always give is, we need few companies that do what Toyota did to Japan, or what HP did in the US, or what Intel did in US in the 80s. Like you basically, like that book that Intel ka CEO wrote, what was his name?
Andy Grove.
Ka book, right?
Only the pyramid survive, or
no, high performance management, right? Like you start realizing like these are companies led by individuals in those phases. I'm not saying Intel today is necessarily that, I don't know. But I'm saying in those phases, for a few decades, these are individuals that transform their companies into like these powerhouses that can just spam out product after product. Look at Apple. Actually, people think Apple is basically because Steve Jobs was this crazy genius. I'm like, I don't think he was a crazy genius. I think he built an amazing culture of how to do product development, how decisions will be made, how people will have certain amount of autonomy and independence, and how people will work with each other. I think we need more companies focused on cracking all of that. Actually, on that front, I will say we still don't have a lot of that in India. And I'm hoping in the next 10 years, we see a few more companies doing that.
No, I really like, that narrative. I think the more and more startup founders can be just obsessed about product, and hardware product definitely require a very different thought process. Or Steve Jobs, at some point, Larry Ellison said he had the mind of an engineer, but heart of an artist. So, getting that, design aesthetic as well as engineering aspect right, and just the right blend, I think that. But look, see, every ecosystem creation requires an inspiration and role model, and you gave a bunch of examples from outside. But I think what you guys are doing in India, being absolutely the first to bring out a really high quality electric two-wheelers, is a role model. I think you guys are doing very well. I wish you all the best. I'm sure you will grow more, and I think this will inspire a lot of people both from outside but also within Ather, also to kind of embrace that attitude and culture and take it with them. So I think it's very, very promising for India. Super glad, first of all, what you have done. I think it's very useful for the entire ecosystem. I'm sure everybody in the country is rightfully should be very proud of what you have done. Like, wish you all the best, and thanks so much for taking the time to talk.
Thanks, Mukesh.
At SparX, we aim to bring to you stories of exponential impact. We share in-depth analysis of what goes behind success stories. If you find our conversations interesting, you can join us by subscribing to our YouTube channel. You can also listen to SparX on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or any other audio platform of your choice. If you have any suggestions on who we should invite or what topics we need to cover, just let us know in the comments. We are always listening, looking for ways to improve, and keep getting better as we go along.